Welcome to Infinite Novel. Dive into epic alternate realities. All rights to original creators.
Chapter 8, wiped out. Since you're so determined to die, we'll give you a quick death. Seeing Cealan's contemptuous attitude, Kurubi and the other fishmen were enraged. Given the long-standing tension between humans and fishmen, they rarely offered humans any respect. After arriving in the East Blue, the Arlong pirates had acted lawlessly, never once fearing any human. Now, despite offering a chance to back down, they were met with only disdain and mockery. They were wary of Cealan's strength, but they were not afraid to fight him. Inferior human, die. Kurubi charged forward, throwing a powerful straight punch. That's the strongest punch. It can smash through 1,000 tiles with a single blow. The nearby fishmen soldiers were excited. It had been a long time since they had seen Kurubi unleash this move. It was the most powerful strike in fishman karate, abandoning fancy techniques to fully capitalize on the raw strength of the fishman body. With their physical strength several times greater than that of humans, this move was devastating when executed by a fishman. The fishman soldiers had witnessed it before. Even pirates with bounties of 8 million berries had died from this punch, their internal organs shattered, blood pouring from every orifice. As Kurubi's fist swung forward, Nami, standing beside Cealan, felt the intense force carried by the strike. Her pupils contracted as she instinctively wanted to dodge, but the overwhelming pressure of the punch rooted her to the spot. She looked at Cealan nervously, unsure how he would handle it. Facing this fierce attack, Cealan did not dodge. He simply curled his lips, held the greatsword in his right hand, and calmly raised his left fist. "You're too arrogant." Seeing Cealan's casual response, Kurubi's fury spiked. The blood rushing to his head made his punch even stronger. He wanted Cealan to understand the true power of fishmen and how tough their bodies were. Kurubi had already imagined the scene of Cealan's arm shattering under his blow. A cruel smile crept onto his face. The two fists collided. In an instant, a cloud of blood mist exploded. A severed forearm turned into shredded flesh, with fragments of bone flying through the air. A tall figure was sent hurtling backward, crashing into two other fishmen and knocking them to the ground. Kurubi, who now lay slumped on top of his companions, had lost all trace of his earlier cruelty. His face filled with horror as he stared at Cealan, trembling, unable to utter a word. The arm that had been destroyed was not Cealan's. It was Kurubi's own. The moment their fists met, Kurubi felt as though he had punched a mountain made of diamond. It was incomparably hard, with an overwhelming force behind it. In just one strike, Kurubi's so-called invincible body was crushed. His arm exploded, and his entire body was left incapacitated. He could do nothing but lie there, barely able to breathe. How is this possible? Kurubi was taken out instantly. The surrounding fishmen, who had been eagerly waiting to see Kurubi dominate the fight, were stunned. They could not believe what they had just witnessed. Kurubi was the top officer of the Arlong pirates, second only to Arlong himself. His specialty was fishman karate, and he was feared for it. Yet now, using his strongest technique at full power, he had been crippled by a single punch from Cealan. The sight terrified the fishmen. Cealan, who had taken Kurubi's strongest punch head-on, had not even taken a single step back. The only blood on him was from Kurubi. Nami and the villagers were all frozen in shock. Their minds were full of disbelief. The enemy they thought was invincible had been crushed so easily. It felt unreal. Even Nojiko, who had believed in Cealan's strength from the beginning, was stunned. She had thought Cealan would rely on his swordsmanship to deal with the enemy. She never imagined that he could defeat Kurubi with just a punch. After the initial shock came relief. With power like this, Cealan could definitely defeat the Arlong pirates. So this is the power of a fishman? How weak. How pathetic. Cealan clenched his left fist, calmly feeling the force behind Kurubi's strike. It was decent. About on par with Krieg. But to challenge him with that level of strength was laughable. Cealan's synchronization was with Heracles, the Heracles of Greek mythology. Even with only 37% synchronization, still far from full power, he already possessed strength comparable to a marine vice-admiral. For someone like Kurubi, defeating him was effortless. Cealan looked at the remaining fishmen and stepped forward, his greatsword in hand. He hadn't come here just to deal with Kurubi. At this moment, Cealan looked like a demon risen from hell, the oppressive aura around him making the fishmen tremble with fear. The same fishmen who had acted so viciously in Kokoyashi village were now visibly shaking under Cealan's pressure. Cealan raised his greatsword, but instead of cutting down with the blade, he used the flat of the sword to strike. He still intended to collect their bounties, so there was no need to make things too messy. Each swing of the sword landed squarely on a fishman's head. Cealan controlled his strength carefully. The flat of the blade was enough to crush their skulls without making too much of a mess. Naturally, the fishmen did not just sit and wait for death. Some tried to fight back, using their numbers in an attempt to overwhelm him, but it was useless. They attacked with fishman karate. However, compared to Kurubi's already inadequate skills, their techniques were even weaker. How could they possibly hurt Cealan? One by one, Cealan knocked them out with ease, like putting babies to sleep. Chu, the smooch fishman, fired high-pressure water bullets at Cealan. It was the same attack he had used to blast apart trees earlier. Cealan simply blocked with his greatsword. The water bullets had no effect on the massive blade. Not even a tremor. Calmly, Cealan stepped forward and knocked Chu out with one clean strike. Haki, with his 6 arms and 6 swords, spun into action, creating an airtight wall of blades. Cealan responded with the back of his sword once again. Swinging down powerfully, the greatsword created a strong gust of wind. Against Cealan's overwhelming force, Haki's defensive wall was as fragile as glass. The moment their weapons clashed, Haki's defense shattered. He was slammed straight into the ground, unable to move. Cealan knew that Haki had once saved Silver's Rayleigh's life. But so what? Even with such a powerful system backing him, if Cealan still hesitated to act, it would only be laughable. Every fishman with even a little strength among the Arlong pirates was crushed beneath Cealan's might. He's a demon. Run for your lives. The remaining fishmen no longer had the courage to fight. One by one, they turned and fled, hoping to escape. Cealan looked around. They were all just low-level grunts, worth nothing. He wasn't interested in playing any games of cat and mouse. Heh, I was hoping to keep the bodies intact. Cealan shook his head slightly, sounding almost disappointed. He raised his greatsword. A wave-shaped air slash burst out from the blade, cutting through the fleeing fishmen instantly. Their bodies were split apart before they could even react. Just like that. Aside from Arlong himself, the Arlong pirates were completely wiped out. Like slicing through vegetables, Cealan had annihilated the pirate crew that had terrorized the East Blue. The fishmen who had once dominated the Kanamai Islands, feared by countless villagers, were nothing but ants before Cealan. Chapter 9 Petty Tricks. The battle was completely one-sided. Or rather, it could not even be called a battle, it was a massacre. Is this the strength of the strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue? Nami was deeply shaken by Cealan's strength, her mind blank with disbelief. That's amazing. Coming back to her senses, Nami shouted excitedly. Cealan's godlike and devilish figure was firmly etched into the hearts of everyone present. To them, he was a hero. None of the villagers feared Cealan's killing, because the ones he had killed were the pirates who had oppressed them for so long, and it was Cealan who had pulled them back from the edge of death. What they felt was only gratitude for Cealan and awe of his strength. As the villagers cheered loudly for Cealan's feat. Inside Arlong Park, Arlong stood on the balcony, on the verge of madness. It's over, it's all over. My brothers, my crew, my pirate group, everything is finished. Arlong crushed the wine glass in his hand, not caring as shards of glass cut into his palm. He had dreamed of building the Arlong Empire in the East Blue, enslaving humans alongside his brothers. Now, that dream had been shattered. Arlong's bloodshot eyes glared fiercely, his sharp teeth grinding together. The moment Kurubi had been crippled by Cealan's punch, Arlong had been ready to step in himself. But Cealan's movements had been too fast, and his strength too overwhelming. In less than half a minute, every single fishman present had been wiped out. Before Arlong could even make a move, his pirate crew had ceased to exist. Just moments earlier, he had been bragging confidently to Captain Nezumi, convinced that his men alone would be enough to deal with Cealan. Now, his men were all dead, and Arlong stood alone, a captain without a crew. The terror that Cealan brought to him felt exactly like the nightmare of the Grand Line all over again. The Cealan he now faced was not some rookie bounty hunter from the East Blue. He was like a terrifying warlord of the sea. I'll kill him, I'll kill him, I'll kill him. Arlong shouted incoherently, consumed by rage and madness. Those fishmen were not just his subordinates. They were his friends, his family. They had once sailed together as members of the Sun Pirates, sharing life and death for more than a decade. Their bond ran deep. Now, all of them were gone. No matter how strong Cealan was, Arlong would make him pay. Beside him, Captain Nezumi trembled uncontrollably. At this moment, he fully understood why the Navy had placed so much importance on recruiting Cealan. Nezumi had encountered monsters like this before. During his time reporting at Marine Headquarters, he had come across Admirals Akainu and Aokiji. The overwhelming pressure from just brushing past their presence had made him feel the terror of death. Right now, Nezumi viewed Cealan the same way as a seed destined for the position of admiral, a rare powerhouse even among vice-admirals. Nezumi wouldn't even dare dream of standing against such a monster. He signaled to the 2 Marines at his side, quietly planning to slip away through the back. "Where do you think you're going?" A voice, filled with rage and madness, echoed behind him. Nezumi froze immediately. Arlong's red eyes locked onto him. Already driven into desperation, there was no way Arlong would allow Nezumi to escape so easily. "I was just leaving first, planning to find another chance to retaliate later," Nezumi stammered, trying to talk his way out. Of course, he had no intention of retaliating against Cealan. He was only trying to pacify Arlong for the moment. Is that so? No need to wait. Let's kill him right now. Arlong, mad with grief and rage, did not believe Nezumi's excuses. He wanted revenge, now. He knew full well that he could not defeat Cealan, but he could still use Nezumi as leverage. It didn't matter how famous Cealan was, or how corrupt Nezumi had been. If Cealan killed a Marine officer in public, his relationship with the Navy would immediately freeze. Arlong was sure that once word spread, the Navy would abandon any plans of recruiting Cealan. They might even place a bounty on him. Not to mention, Arlong was a former member of the Sun Pirates and had ties with Jinbei, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. If Jinbei learned that Cealan had wiped out the Arlong pirates and killed one of his old crewmates, there was a high chance Jinbei would personally go after him. The thought of Cealan being hunted down made Arlong let out a low, sinister laugh. He threw the 2 Marines off the balcony, then jumped down himself, carrying Nezumi under one arm. With his enhanced instincts and battle sense, Cealan immediately detected the movement overhead. Looking up, he saw 4 figures falling toward him from the sky. Cealan instantly understood Arlong's plan, but if Arlong thought such a cheap trick could trap him, he was severely underestimating him. Without hesitation, Cealan swung his greatsword, releasing 2 powerful air slashes at the descending group. One slash struck the 2 marines, turning them into a mist of blood. The other slash hit Nezumi and sliced off half of Arlong's body along with him. The remains of Nezumi and the marines merged into the bloody mist drifting through the air, while Arlong, barely alive, continued to fall. Arlong's scheme had been crushed before it could even begin. The surrounding villagers had been wondering why Cealan had suddenly swung his sword into the sky, but then they saw the thick cloud of blood mist above. As Arlong crashed into the ground, he kicked up a cloud of dust. Half of his body was gone, only his head remaining intact. Blood spilled from Arlong's mouth as he stared wide-eyed. Ha! Cealan walked up to Arlong, his tone full of mocking disdain. Staring into Cealan's eyes, Arlong let out one final breath. He died with his eyes open, filled with regret and fear. In the end, Arlong finally recognized the true horror of Cealan. Not only was he unbelievably strong, but he was also dangerously intelligent. Arlong could not understand why such a monster existed in the East Blue. This was the kind of being that should only appear in the New World. This is Arlong. Thank goodness. Arlong is dead too. Even with half of his body missing and his face covered in blood and dust, the villagers immediately recognized Arlong. The crowd erupted. The Arlong pirates, who had terrorized Kokoyashi village for 8 long years, were completely wiped out. Arlong, the once invincible tyrant who had enslaved them, was now just a corpse lying broken on the ground. 2 air slashes had ended him before he could even properly appear on the battlefield. Such overwhelming strength was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. After a brief moment of stunned silence, the villagers burst into loud cheers. Long live the strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue. Long live Cealan. The shouts of the villagers echoed through Arlong Park like thunder. Although the sight of the blood mist overhead was unsettling, Nami could only chalk it up to the fishman's unique physique and heavy bleeding. She looked at Arlong's lifeless body, tears welling up in her eyes. The hatred she had carried for so many years, the grief for her adoptive mother Belmir, and all the pain she had endured were finally released. Thank you, Cealan. Nami threw her arms around Cealan, holding him tightly. She was willing to give everything to the man who had saved her and her people. Cealan remained silent, simply reaching out to gently soothe Nami's emotions. Chapter 10 Windrider at night. Kokoyashi village held a grand celebration for the defeat of the Arlong pirates. To honor their hero, the villagers brought out the best ingredients from their homes and carefully prepared delicious food. At the bonfire party, the villagers presented their finest dishes to Cealan. They sang and danced around the bonfire, their faces filled with joy and excitement. For 8 long years under the oppression of the Arlong pirates, the villagers had lived in fear and despair. Now that their tormentors were gone, they fully released their emotions, dancing passionately in tribute to the hero who saved them, Cealan Alaric. As he enjoyed the delicious food, Cealan quietly watched the villagers' celebration. This is the atmosphere I prefer. Watching the villagers singing and dancing, a sense of accomplishment welled up in Cealan's heart. In the 6 months since arriving in this world, he had been either hunting pirates or traveling to hunt pirates. He had seen too much cruelty and bloodshed, the cold reality of survival in this lawless sea. Compared to witnessing pirates running wild, he would much rather see these innocent villagers smile freely. Before he realized it, Cealan had cleared every dish set before him. Although the food was not as exquisite as the meals at the Baratai, it carried a special flavor of warmth and sincerity. Cealan, thank you. Nami, who had been quietly watching him from a distance, approached with a plate of barbecue and set it in front of him. Cealan was a little surprised. He had been planning to go find Nami, but she came over first. The Arlong pirates are gone. What are your plans for the future? Cealan asked casually while continuing to eat. Nami froze at the question. Her plans? Her greatest dream until now had been to free the village, and that dream had finally been realized. Her other dream was to chart a map of the entire world. But how could she accomplish that alone? She thought about the Straw Hat Pirates. They had been good companions, but she had betrayed their trust. They would never accept her again. Besides, they were pirates. After the suffering caused by the Arlong pirates, Nami no longer wanted to be associated with any pirate crew. If possible, she wanted to follow Cealan. A bounty hunter so powerful and righteous was exactly the kind of partner she could believe in, but she had already owed him such a great debt. How could she trouble him any further? I'll stay in the East Blue and work to collect enough money to repay you. Nami made up her mind. Rather than joining pirates and risking becoming part of the evil she hated, she would give up that path. She owed Cealan too much. She would spend the rest of her life repaying that debt. I need a navigator more than I need berries. Cealan saw through Nami's thoughts at a glance. Thanks to his intervention, the Straw Hat Pirates had never come to aid Nami. Her impression of pirates remained that of Arlong, a vicious tyrant. The truth was, pirates like Luffy were the exception. Most pirates in this world were exactly like Arlong. Nami, are you willing to be my navigator? Cealan finished the last bite of barbecue, wiped his hands clean, and solemnly extended his right hand to Nami. That's wonderful. Nami's eyes widened in surprise, but without hesitation, she grasped Cealan's hand tightly. She had hoped to join him but had never expected the opportunity would come so quickly. In that moment, Nami felt incredibly lucky. Not only could she repay her debt, but she could also pursue her dream alongside Cealan. From now on, we're partners. Cealan smiled. The top navigator was now officially on his crew. Yeah, Nami nodded enthusiastically, her eyes shining with determination. From the moment she first met Cealan at the Baratai, to the moment he saved her on the beach, and then watching him annihilate the Arlong pirates with overwhelming strength. Though their time together had been brief, Cealan's presence had already left an unshakable mark on Nami's heart. Seeing the two of them seal their agreement, the surrounding villagers and Nojiko smiled warmly. They were truly happy for Nami. With Cealan as her companion, they believed she would surely achieve her dream. Somewhere among the crowd, a villager passed 2 glasses of beer into Nami and Cealan's hands. They raised their drinks, joining the celebration once more. By the time the banquet ended, it was already early morning. Cealan spent the night resting in the room the villagers had prepared for him. The next morning, at sunrise, with the help of the villagers, Cealan prepared to set sail. His old boat remained docked at Kokoyashi village. It was far too small to handle a voyage into the Grand Line. Instead, his new ship would be the Arlong pirates' main vessel, the Shark Superb. It was an excellent, large ship. Much of the wealth Arlong had plundered over the years, aside from what was spent building Arlong Park, had gone into this ship. Compared to the Going Merry, the Shark Superb was noticeably larger, and its materials were far sturdier. The ship was fully outfitted with various facilities, including a kitchen, bathroom, sauna, and over a dozen luxurious rooms. The hull was reinforced with top-quality timber, second only to the legendary treasure tree atom. This was the ship Arlong had built for himself, intended as the core of his pirate fleet. If his dream of establishing the Arlong Empire in the East Blue had failed, he had planned to sail this ship back to the Grand Line. Unfortunately for him, Arlong encountered Cealan. Now, this fine ship had become Cealan's new vessel. Cealan was quite satisfied. Compared to the luxury yachts of his previous life, this ship was no worse. Cealan, you should raise your flag on this ship and give it a new name. Nami wiped the sweat from her brow as she looked expectantly at Cealan. She and the villagers had worked hard to strip the ship of all traces of the Arlong pirates. Now that the ship belonged to Cealan, it was time to replace the emblem. Cealan picked up a paintbrush and, with just a few bold strokes, painted a new symbol on the blank flag. There was no skull, no flashy decorations. Only a massive greatsword hung at the center of the flag. It was his own weapon, a symbol of absolute power. Like the sword of Damocles, it represented the majesty and authority to judge all things. As for the name of the ship, Wind Rider, Cealan thought for a moment, then gave the ship its new name. Wind Rider, riding the wind and waves. What a great name. Compared to the chaotic names of many pirate ships, Wind Rider felt far more refined. Simple, but filled with ambition. To rise on the wind and soar straight to the summit of this world, that is the meaning of Wind Rider. Cealan smiled slightly, correcting Nami's understanding. His ambition was far greater than simply riding the waves. In this grand era of piracy, Cealan would ride the momentum and claim the world for himself. Nami stared at Cealan, dazed. Compared to a straw hat-wearing boy shouting about becoming Pirate King, the man before her radiated a far greater courage. Her heart beat faster as Cealan seemed to glow in her eyes. I'm going to pack my things. Blushing, Nami turned quickly, a little too embarrassed to face Cealan directly. Chapter 11, plans for the Grand Line at noon, on the seaside of Kokoyashi village. Barrels of fresh water, baskets of vegetables and fruit, and a large amount of meat were delivered to the Wind Rider. The villagers were extremely enthusiastic, even wanting to give their homes to Cealan. Enough. There's no room for more. Seeing that the storage room was already full, Cealan stopped the overly eager villagers. The captured fishmen with bounties were already lying unconscious in the cabin. There were also piles of treasure and berries stored inside the Wind Rider's hold. Everything was ready. It was time to set sail. Goodbye, Mr. Cealan. Nami, don't cause trouble for Mr. Cealan. The villagers waved goodbye to both Cealan and Nami. Nami, stay by Mr. Cealan's side from now on. Don't be so willful. Nojiko smiled as she gave Nami a reminder. The two of them were as close as sisters. Of course, Nojiko was reluctant to see Nami leave, but at the same time, she was genuinely happy for her. I'm not a burden. I'll be helpful. Nami clenched her fist and assured Nojiko confidently. It's just a shame that I won't be able to see Belmir's orange trees. Nami's mood dropped. Those orange trees were the legacy left behind by her adoptive mother, Belmir. As long as she was with the orange trees, it felt like Belmir was still by her side. That's not necessarily true. Nojiko winked at Nami with a playful smile before turning away. With such a good captain, Nami really had nothing to worry about. Nami was momentarily confused. Come on, Nami, it's time to go. Cealan's voice came from behind. He was already standing on the deck of the ship. Nami didn't have time to think about it any further. She quickly ran aboard the Wind Rider. As soon as she stepped onto the ship, Nami noticed 2 vibrant orange trees swaying on the deck. Thank you, Cealan. You're amazing. Nami threw her arms around Cealan, her excitement overflowing. It turned out that her captain was such a considerate person. What should she do if she starts liking him even more? Alright, let's hurry up and set sail. Nami's soft body pressed against Cealan as her short orange hair brushed against his face. Cealan helplessly pushed her away. Seducing him like this was asking for trouble. Yes, Captain. Nami gave him a crisp salute. Just as she was about to start the ship, she paused. Cealan, where are we heading? Destination, Logue Town, full speed ahead. Cealan pointed toward their next course. Nami immediately turned the helm. With Nami's superb navigation skills, the Wind Rider began its journey toward Logue Town. While Nami focused on steering, Cealan entered the treasure room, where the loot from the Arlong pirates was stored. Although the Arlong pirates had squandered most of their money on building Arlong Park and their foolish dream of the Arlong Empire, there were still 80 million berries remaining. The total bounties of the Arlong pirates added up to nearly 45 million berries. There were also the 100 million berries that Nami had handed over. Even without receiving any bounty rewards yet, Cealan now had 180 million berries on hand. System, consume 180 million berries to increase synchronization progress. As the berries in the treasure room disappeared, Cealan's system panel began to change once again. Consume all berries to improve synchronization progress. The system panel flickered for a moment before updating. Host, Cealan Alaric Template Berserker Class Heracles Synchronization Progress, 50.5% berries, 3 million strength, B+, durability, B+, agility, B+, magic, B+, luck, A, noble phantasm, A+, personal skills, battle continuation, B, mind's eye, fake, B, valor, A+, divinity, A, madness enhancement, B, noble phantasms, god hand, the 12 labors, B, 9 lives, shooting the 100 heads, C, A+. A tremendous force surged into his body, instantly enhancing all of Cealan's attributes. He nodded with satisfaction. Every one of his physical stats had risen from B to B+. Don't underestimate the small addition of a plus sign. B+ represented an exceptional level, effectively doubling the attribute's power. At this point, Cealan's strength, speed, endurance, and magic power had all doubled, making his combat abilities even more overwhelming. With my current strength, no one in the first half of the Grand Line can compare to me. The increase in power was within Cealan's expectations. However, the change in synchronization progress made him frown slightly. The progress hadn't reached the expected 55%, stopping instead at 50.5%. After reaching 50%, does it really take 100 million berries to increase synchronization by just 1%? Cealan thought it over and found this result acceptable. Once they entered the Grand Line, pirates would be everywhere. In the weak seas of the East Blue, there were only a handful of pirates with bounties in the tens of millions. The rest were small fry with bounties of 1 million or less. Cealan had spent a lot of time and effort capturing those pirates, but the bounty earnings weren't much. The Grand Line was different. It was a paradise for pirates. Any pirate group with even the slightest ambition was there. Pirates with bounties of 10 or 20 million were as common as crucian carp crossing the river. They were countless. Just by defeating any pirate crew, he could easily obtain 50 million berries. Figures like Arlong and Don Krieg were considered lower tier in the Grand Line, nowhere near the top. There were also the 7 warlords of the sea. Despite their relatively low bounties, their strength was undeniable, and they often commanded large crews. Although it wasn't possible to claim bounty rewards for capturing them, fighting such opponents could still improve his synchronization progress. Compared to hunting ordinary pirates, the cost-effectiveness of targeting the 7 warlords was much higher. The only issue is that I still don't have Haki. Cealan couldn't help but feel frustrated. In the East Blue, there was no opportunity to learn Haki. The reason he was able to push his swordsmanship to the level of a swordsman was entirely thanks to the Heracles template. Even in the first half of the Grand Line, Haki was something only true elites possessed. It wasn't until the New World that Haki became widespread. Without Haki, facing Logia-type devil fruit users would put him at a serious disadvantage. No matter how powerful his physical attacks were, they would be completely ineffective. Likewise, Logia users couldn't hurt him either, but it would be a deadlock. Still, Cealan had a plan. Crocodile, who ruled over Alabasta, would make a good teacher. Of course, compared to someone like Kaido, Crocodile was far from the top. Kaido was a top-tier monster, capable of knocking out Conqueror's Haki users with a single swing, or awakening the Nika fruit wielder with 2 strikes. At Cealan's current level, there was no way he could handle Kaido's brutal training methods. He hadn't even set foot on the path of Haki yet, let alone reach the level where he could learn Kaido's advanced techniques. Crocodile, however, was just right. With his moderate-level armament and observation Haki, he could still serve as an effective mentor. Cealan could already imagine the scene of himself awakening both types of Haki under Crocodile's guidance. The Grand Line. I'm looking forward to it more and more. Cealan's blood was boiling with excitement. The East Blue was just the starting point of the pirate world. The Grand Line was where the real adventure began. It was far too dull to keep hunting small-time pirates with measly million-berry bounties. He wanted to charge into the Grand Line and fight against the true powerhouses. Chapter 12, He's a Hero. A few days later, the strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue struck again, eliminated the Arlong pirates and liberated the Kanamai Islands. Another explosive headline appeared in the East Blue newspapers. It's only been a few days, and he already wiped out the Arlong pirates. The remaining pirates in the East Blue could hardly believe it. Don Krieg had just been killed a few days ago, and now the Arlong pirates were destroyed as well. This was the Arlong Pirates, a powerful crew that had returned from the Grand Line. Compared to the local tyrant Don Krieg, the Arlong Pirates were much stronger. Yet in less than a week, the two strongest pirate groups in the East Blue had been eliminated by Cealan. They really wanted to ask Cealan, "Don't you need to rest? Are we pirates really so worthy of your attention?" The few remaining pirates in the East Blue were now living in fear, not daring to loot openly. For a time, the entire East Blue fell into silence. Days passed without a single report of pirate attacks. What? The Arlong Pirates were destroyed? The villages that had been plundered by the Arlong Pirates were shocked. The Arlong Pirates' headquarters was located in Kokoyasi village, but their activities were not limited to that area. From time to time, they would sail out and raid the surrounding villages. Hundreds of villages had suffered under their brutality, and tens of thousands of villagers despised them to the core. It could be said that the Arlong Pirates were infamous throughout the entire East Blue. Is it true? Did Lord Cealan really take them down? Countless villagers were stunned once again. They had always known that Cealan was strong, but they never expected him to be this powerful. In just a few days, the two major tyrants of the East Blue had been eliminated one after the other. The efficiency was unbelievable. Lord Cealan is here, and the skies have cleared. Lord Cealan is here, and the pirates are gone. Lord Cealan is here, and we have hope. Countless villagers wept with joy, shouting Cealan's name. Half a year ago, before Cealan arrived, they had been tormented endlessly by pirates. But in the 6 months since Cealan appeared, the number of pirates had steadily decreased, and their lives had improved day by day. Now that both the Krieg pirates and the Arlong pirates had been wiped out, there were hardly any pirates left in the East Blue. The entire East Blue had truly become the weakest sea, where pirates with bounties over 3 million were now extremely rare. At the East Blue Navy's office, Colin also received the news, but instead of feeling happy, his expression remained troubled. There was still another major issue weighing on his mind. Captain Nezumi from the 16th branch has been missing for several days now, and there's still no sign of him? Colin asked his two subordinates, frowning with concern. Nezumi was the highest-ranking officer of the 16th branch. His disappearance was a significant matter for the East Blue Navy. There are some clues, but... The subordinate looked at Colin nervously, hesitating. It's already come to this and you're still hesitating? Speak. Colin slammed the table, his anger flaring. We received information that Captain Nezumi went to Kokoyasi village and never returned. You mean, he was killed by the Arlong pirates? Colin's tone eased slightly. With the Arlong pirates destroyed, there was no need to make too much of it. It's unlikely. Captain Nezumi had long-standing financial ties with the Arlong pirates. The subordinate wiped the sweat from his forehead and cautiously handed over a stack of documents. What? This can't be true. How could a marine captain be connected with pirates? Colin instinctively refused to believe it, but once he looked through the documents, he was stunned. The contents were shocking. Nezumi was not only closely associated with the Arlong pirates, but he also had dealings with many other pirate crews within the jurisdiction. Bang! 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 Boom! Colin was furious, like an enraged lion. He slammed the table 3 times, each strike heavier than the last. On the third strike, the table couldn't withstand the force and shattered into pieces. The day Nezumi went to meet the Arlong pirates, Cealan was there too. The two subordinates gritted their teeth as they reported. They knew just how much Colin valued Cealan. Colin, who had been furious just moments ago, suddenly froze. His anger seemed to dissipate, leaving him silent. He wanted to deny it instinctively. Cealan was a bounty hunter. How could he kill a marine captain? Was he not afraid of making the Navy his enemy? But thinking about it carefully, Cealan was indeed the prime suspect. Since debuting in the East Blue, Cealan had eliminated hundreds of pirate crews. Among them were thousands of individuals with bounties, not to mention the countless small fry without bounties. Would someone like him really be afraid of the Navy? The Arlong pirates were connected to Jinbi, the Knight of the Sea and one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Even the Navy had to show them some respect and had never dared to wipe out the Arlong pirates. But Cealan had shown no hesitation, killing them without a second thought and completely annihilating the crew. With that in mind, killing a corrupt Navy officer like Nezumi would be nothing for Cealan. Should we issue a bounty? The two subordinates asked nervously. A marine captain, even if corrupt, was still a member of the Navy. Being killed by an outsider crossed a line the Navy could not allow. But honestly, they didn't want to become enemies with Cealan either. He was the hero of the entire East Blue. If they put a bounty on him, the whole sea would erupt in chaos. Not to mention, Cealan's strength was terrifying. Even if the entire East Blue Navy joined forces, they might not be able to stop him. What kind of bounty are we talking about? Do you think this is something a human could handle? The usually refined Colin couldn't help but curse. He was certain that if the Navy really put a bounty on Cealan, the man wouldn't hesitate to hunt down Marines as easily as he hunted pirates. Colin clearly understood Cealan's terrifying potential. If they forced him into becoming the Navy's enemy, he might awaken Conqueror's haki and establish a 5-emperor balance in the New World. Just thinking about that possibility made Colin shudder. If the man who had been slaughtering pirates like chickens turned to slaughtering Marines instead, it would be the Navy's worst nightmare. All of this would happen simply because they executed the wrong judgment over the death of a corrupt officer. The wave of public opinion would crush the Navy's reputation beyond repair. Cealan did not kill Captain Nezumi. Captain Nezumi was killed by the Arlong pirates. Cealan remains the hero of the East Blue. Without the slightest hesitation, Colin chose to clear Cealan of any suspicion. He would not allow this incident to drive Cealan into making an enemy of the Navy. The two subordinates were completely stunned. They couldn't understand how things had turned out like this. What are you two standing around for? Spread the word immediately. Colin needed to control the narrative as soon as possible. No one could be allowed to use this as leverage against Cealan. Yes, sir. We'll take care of it right away. The two subordinates responded quickly. Do you know where Cealan is headed? Just as they were about to leave, Colin stopped them again. He's on his way to Log Town, probably to claim the bounty. The subordinates had already received this information. Good. I will personally meet with him and clear up any doubts he may have. Colin waved them off, then sat back down, deep in thought, carefully planning how to approach Cealan. Chapter 13 Buggy the Clown at noon, on the Wind Rider. Cealan and Nami were on the deck, enjoying lunch under the warm breeze and sunlight. Suddenly, a news coup flew across the sky. Nami took out a berry and bought a newspaper from the Seagull. She glanced at the front page and couldn't help but scream, "Hey, the newspaper says that Captain Nezumi was killed by Arlong, but I didn't see that happen at the time." Nami was very puzzled. She clearly remembered the Marine captain who had worked with Arlong to cheat her out of her money. She hadn't seen his body at Arlong Park and had assumed he had escaped. Nami was certain that Arlong definitely didn't kill Nezumi. "Of course you didn't see it. I'm the one who killed Nezumi." Cealan had no reason to hide the truth from Nami. After Cealan's reminder, Nami recalled the details of that day. Only Arlong had fallen from the sky, but Cealan had swung his swords twice. There had been a large amount of blood mist in the air. At the time, she had simply assumed it was because of Arlong's special physique and his high endurance. But thinking about it now, that blood mist must have come from Nezumi, who had been cut to pieces. Luckily, the Navy doesn't know it was you. Otherwise, we'd be in serious trouble. Right now, they're still calling you a hero. Nami patted her chest in relief, thankful for their narrow escape from disaster. But don't they already know? Cealan pointed to the newspaper in Nami's hand. If the Navy really didn't know, why would they pin Nezumi's death on Arlong and use it to boost the reputation of a dead pirate? Cealan had not killed Nezumi in public, which left the Navy room to handle the situation. But they're still promoting you as a hero. Nami was confused. In this kind of situation, shouldn't they have started hunting him down? "Nami, are you afraid of me?" Cealan did not answer directly but asked her a question instead. "No." Nami shook her head. How could she be afraid? Cealan was her hero. But the Navy is afraid. Cealan stopped speaking and continued eating. Nami looked at Cealan, at a loss for words. Who am I following? Nami had known that Cealan was strong. He had easily wiped out the entire Arlong pirates. But she hadn't expected him to be so powerful that even the Navy didn't dare to make him an enemy. In that moment, an overwhelming sense of security filled Nami's heart. She looked at Cealan, her eyes practically sparkling. "Boss Buggy, are we really going out to loot?" Vice Captain Moji had a bitter expression as he held up the newspaper. He felt genuine fear toward Cealan's strength. "Buggy, if you want to die, don't drag me into it." Alvida had no intention of going out. If they ran into Cealan, they wouldn't be able to handle it. "Relax, Cealan is just one man. There's no way our luck could be that bad." Buggy was full of confidence. "Things like that didn't just happen by coincidence. We won't steal too much. We'll stop once we've got enough to buy a decent ship." Obviously, Buggy was also afraid of Cealan. But after the battle with the Straw Hat Pirates, their ship had been damaged, and they were in urgent need of a replacement. "Boss Buggy, I don't think you need to be so worried." The strategist, Kabeji, spoke up, immediately drawing everyone's attention. "You're a splitting human. Cealan's swordsmanship and physical attacks are useless against you." "That's right. I'm not afraid of him." The usually timid Buggy suddenly stood up with confidence. This was the strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue, but now was the time for Buggy the Clown to shine. "The era of Buggy the Clown is coming. Captain, there's a good ship over there." One of the crew interrupted Buggy's fantasy. Buggy glared at him, then turned his gaze toward the ship flying a giant sword emblem on its flag. "What a fine ship, what a fine ship. I want it." With just one look, Buggy couldn't take his eyes off it. He was practically drooling. The solid hull, the towering mast, the brand new sails. This ship's configuration would be considered excellent even in the Grand Line. In the East Blue, it stood out like a jewel. It was simply his dream ship. Buggy announced that this would be the first step toward building his Joker empire. "Boss Buggy, don't you think this might be trouble?" Kabeji was a bit concerned. With such a good ship, the people on board must be quite capable. The logo on the flag looks like that person's weapon. Alvida stared at the giant sword emblem and recalled the weapon she had seen in the newspaper. It can't be him. That guy only sails a small boat and has never been attacked. The sharp-witted Kabeji immediately dismissed Alvida's suspicion. Since Cealan's debut, his fame had spread throughout the East Blue. His iconic small ship had become well known to every pirate in these waters. "What are you all so afraid of? I'm Buggy." Buggy was as arrogant as ever. He was determined to get that ship. Besides, even if it really was Cealan's ship, so what? Cealan's greatest strength was his swordsmanship, which was completely useless against Buggy's devil fruit ability. Even if Buggy couldn't win, he was confident he could escape without a scratch. If it belonged to someone else, it would be even easier. Almost all the big-name pirates in the East Blue had already been taken down by Cealan. Buggy, the clown, was the only major pirate left. Taking the ship should be a piece of cake. Alright, prepare to board them. Seeing how confident Buggy was, Vice Captain Moji quickly gave the order to attack. Idiot! What if you damage my ship? Buggy slapped Moji on the head. There was no way he would let such a fine ship get damaged. Bring me closer. I'll handle this myself. Buggy had already imagined the scene that would follow. He would show off his power. The crew of the other ship would be so terrified they would hand over the ship without a fight. On the Windrider, Nami also spotted the Buggy pirate ship approaching. Cealan, pirates are coming. What should we do? Nami's voice was anxious as she called out to Cealan, who was sunbathing on the deck. Years of torment by pirates had left her with deep scars. Seeing a pirate ship approaching instinctively made her panic. Don't worry. They're just kind-hearted people coming to deliver bounty money. Cealan remained calm, even a little amused. Where had this group of foolish pirates come from, daring to attack him head-on? Were they trying to help him solve his money shortage? Yeah, there's no way they could be your opponent. Hearing Cealan's words, Nami immediately relaxed. She was no longer the lonely little cat burglar. She now had someone powerful to rely on. Cealan was the strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue, having captured countless pirates. He was the man who had defeated the two top pirate crews in the East Blue within a single week. Both Arlong and Don Krieg, considered the strongest pirates in the East Blue, had been effortlessly defeated by Cealan. No one else in these waters could threaten him, so what was there to be afraid of? If anything, it was the pirates on the other side who should be afraid. Nami quickly adjusted her mindset and even became curious. She wondered which unlucky pirate had the nerve to challenge the King of Hell. Nami was already looking forward to the scene that was about to unfold. The clueless pirates would surely be terrified once they realized it was Cealan. Chapter 14, a good beating. The two ships approached quickly. It looks like there are only two people on board. Buggy's eyes lit up. This was a perfect opportunity. He was about to get himself a new ship for free. Don't move. I'll handle this myself. Buggy stopped his crew, who were eager to charge forward. At a time like this, how could he let his subordinate steal the spotlight? It was his chance to show off. Alvida stared at the two people standing on the opposite deck, feeling that they looked strangely familiar. That beautiful girl was Nami. She had seen her before. And the man beside her, along with the giant sword by his side. Wait, that looks like Cealan. Alvida's pupils contracted as she recognized him. Before she could stop him, Buggy had already taken the lead, jumping onto the deck of the Windrider. Watching Buggy rush to his own doom, Alvida could no longer stay still. Idiot! I'm not dying with you. Alvida pushed the helmsman aside, cursing as she turned the pirate ship away. Our captain isn't afraid of him, so why are we running? Vice Captain Moji was displeased with Alvida's actions. He still wanted to watch Buggy fight. Fool! Even if Cealan can't kill Buggy, he can still kill us. Alvida shouted while steering the ship farther away. Buggy had the powers of the chop fruit, but the rest of them did not. One swing from Cealan could slaughter everyone else on the ship. Kabeji helped Alvida steer. What he had said to Buggy earlier was just flattery. If they really encountered Cealan, the only option was to run. On the deck of the Windrider. Ha ha, be afraid. I am Captain Buggy, with a bounty of 15 million berries. As soon as he landed on the ship, Buggy stood with his hands on his waist, laughing wildly. The exaggerated clown makeup on his face trembled with excitement, showing the look of a villain who thought he had succeeded. He widened his eyes, eager to see the terrified expressions of the two people before him. Unfortunately, there was no such expression. Cealan and Nami simply watched his performance as if they were watching a clown show. The moment Nami saw it was Buggy, she completely relaxed. A week ago, she had witnessed Luffy and his crew fighting Buggy. Compared to Cealan, that scene had been pathetic. It's you, little thief. Looks like I'll get my revenge today. Buggy immediately recognized Nami as the thief who had stolen his treasure before. Heh, come on, hit me if you can. Nami stuck out her tongue at Buggy, hiding behind Cealan. After spending a few days together, she had become familiar with Cealan and was no longer reserved, showing her lively side. Buggy's clown face flushed red with anger at Nami's provocation. Just as he was about to attack, he was suddenly locked in place by a wave of killing intent. Following that oppressive aura, Buggy's eyes fell on the man he had seen so often in the newspapers, standing next to the iconic giant sword. You're Cealan. Why are you here? Buggy's eyes widened, his voice trembling as it echoed across the sea. How unlucky could he be to run into this monster? Damn Kabeji. Didn't they say Cealan never switched ships? Honestly, I didn't expect to see you here either. Cealan looked at Buggy with a bit of amusement. He was very familiar with this clown. If he remembered correctly, Buggy had already been beaten down by Luffy. How did he still have the courage to cause trouble? Cealan raised his giant sword, ready to give Buggy a proper greeting. Don't get cocky. I'm not afraid of you. I ate the chop fruit. Your swordsmanship is useless against me. Buggy stiffened his neck, forcing out tough words. Cealan didn't bother arguing. He simply swung the giant sword, unleashing a gust of wind. A crescent-shaped slash shot straight toward Buggy. Damn, that's powerful. Buggy's expression shifted instantly. He had once sailed with the Roger Pirates and had seen monsters from the New World. The oppressive aura from this sword slash was not something that belonged to the East Blue. It was the kind of power that could dominate the Grand Line or even earn a place in the New World. In an instant, Buggy's body split into pieces, perfectly dodging the slash. The sword energy struck the sea, carving a massive crack through the water, sending waves crashing violently. Buggy's body quickly reassembled, completely unharmed. So, he really does have some ability. Cealan was not surprised. The power of the Chop fruit truly was formidable. Not only could it nullify slashes, but even Dracul Mihawk's Yora couldn't harm Buggy. Mihawk had cut Buggy into pieces, but he had reassembled unharmed. It was expected that Cealan's swordsmanship alone wouldn't be enough to deal with him. Ha ha ha. Even the so-called strongest bounty hunter in the East Blue is no match for me, Buggy the Clown. Buggy's expression gradually turned arrogant again. His confidence returned. It's finally time for me to rule the East Blue. Wahahaha. Buggy laughed wildly. Even a monster like Cealan couldn't do anything to him. His moment had come. Is that so? Cealan smiled coldly. Swordsmanship wasn't his only strength. How could Buggy, who couldn't even handle a rookie like Luffy, be arrogant in front of him? If my sword can't hurt you, does that mean I can't hit you either? Cealan turned the giant sword and slammed it down toward Buggy. The giant sword weighed 1 ton. In Cealan's hands, it wasn't just a sword, it was practically a giant hammer. Even before the strike landed, Buggy could feel the overwhelming pressure. He knew that if he got hit by this, things would not end well. His Chop fruit allowed him to avoid slashes. But who would swing such a massive, blunt weapon like this in a sword fight? Buggy's body immediately split apart again. His head, torso, and limbs separated into dozens of pieces, scattering in all directions to dodge the attack. Heh, if it were that easy to dodge, Cealan wouldn't have made it this far. In Cealan's hands, the 1-ton giant sword moved as effortlessly as a feather. The sword swept through the air like a fly swatter, slapping every piece of Buggy's scattered body onto the deck. Ah, it hurts, it hurts. Buggy screamed in pain as his body was forcefully smashed back into one piece. Every part of his body ached, swelling badly. Under the repeated blows of Cealan's giant sword, Buggy's entire body had been beaten into the shape of a giant balloon. Originally just a stocky frame, he was now swollen into a fat lump. Especially his clown face, which Cealan had paid special attention to. His face was covered in blood, and even his signature round red nose had been flattened. Tears streamed from the corners of his eyes as his entire face twisted pitifully. Why was this happening? If it didn't hurt so much, Buggy would have slapped himself. Why had he picked a fight with Cealan? He should have just knelt down and begged for mercy from the start. How was it possible that they were in the same East Blue, yet the gap between them was so massive? It was too much. Buggy felt incredibly wronged. Not even in the Grand Line had he encountered such terrifying opponents. What do you think? Am I capable of dealing with you? Cealan asked playfully, kicking Buggy's swollen head aside. He really couldn't understand where Buggy got the courage to act so arrogantly in front of him. A powerhouse who could cleave the sea could easily flatten Buggy with just a stick. Don't get so full of yourself. My crew will come and rescue me. Buggy's entire body was beaten soft, but his mouth still refused to admit defeat. He still had dozens of crew members. There was still hope. Why don't you take a look and see where they are? Cealan grabbed Buggy by the hair and lifted him up, directing his gaze toward the sea. The pirate ship that had been just a few dozen meters away from the Wind Rider was now sitting more than 1,000 meters off in the distance. Buggy could even see the glint of telescope lenses reflecting light from the ship. Not only had his crew not come to rescue him, they were happily watching from afar, laughing at his misfortune. Damn you, Kabeji, I'll kill you. Buggy's face turned red with rage. He completely forgot about the pain as he cursed Kabeji's entire family. After venting his anger for a while, Buggy slumped down, his earlier arrogance completely gone. He wanted to cry, but the clown makeup on his face made it look like he was smiling instead. His flattened red nose made him look even more ridiculous. Damn it, he really had become a clown now. Every subscriber brings us closer to more epic novels. Join Infinite Novel today.